She was just a cafeteria worker, until the fallen dragon prince let no one feed him, but her steam curled through the metallic air of the orbital cafeteria, rising from vats of rehydrated stew and trays of protein loaves that shimmered with synthesized glaze. Lira wiped her brow with the back of her sleeve, her hands moving automatically as she portioned rations for the night shift of technicians. The hum of the station's grav-core pulsed faintly beneath her feet, a rhythm she had come to know better than her own heartbeat. Outside the viewport, stars glimmered like frost scattered on ink, and the remnants of the Draconic War fleet drifted silently. Hulks of alien craft locked in eternal orbit. Lira didn't look out there often. It reminded her of the day the prince fell from the sky. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. She ladled another serving into a tray and slid it down the counter, her mind on the incident 2 weeks ago when the recovery team brought him in. The so-called Dragon Prince, last heir of a species humanity had barely understood before the fighting ended. He was enormous, even in sleep, scales like black glass catching the infirmary's sterile light, veins of dull violet running through his wings. They said he'd been dying ever since his ship crashed into the asteroid ring. They said he refused medical probes, refused the feeding drones, refused to speak to any human voice. Lira hadn't believed it mattered, until he'd looked at her. The first time she saw him up close, she'd been delivering a food cart, an accident of logistics. The infirmary chef was sick, and Commander Hale had ordered the cafeteria to handle the temporary nutritional rations. Lira had been nervous enough just pushing the cart past the checkpoint guards, but when she reached the containment wing, the air had turned sharp, metallic, as if charged with static. Through the transparent barrier, the dragon lay coiled on a reinforced deck, chains of light binding his limbs. The med bots hovered around him, but every attempt to feed him resulted in a low, vibrating growl that shook the glass. When she'd stepped forward, balancing a simple plate of greens and steamed grains, the growl stopped. Now, in the kitchen's humdrum brightness, that memory looped in her mind. His single slit pupil eye, dark as void yet rimmed with an uncanny gentleness. She'd been terrified but held out the plate anyway. He had sniffed, exhaled softly, and lowered his massive head. With trembling fingers, she'd offered the food. He'd eaten directly from her hands, careful not to touch her skin with his fangs. Since then, every meal he accepted came only through her. Lira, the voice snapped her from the haze. Cook Ferris waved from the prep table. Commander Hale's looking for you. Again. Her stomach dropped. She wiped her hands quickly on her apron. Did he say what for? Same thing as yesterday, probably. Your special assignment. Ferris smirked. Maybe the dragon's finally learning manners. Lira didn't reply. She stripped off her gloves and headed down the corridor, past the buzzing dispenser arrays and into the colder administrative wing. The corridor lights dimmed automatically as the system recognized her ID chip. It still felt strange, walking with the clearance of someone who mattered. Just a cafeteria worker, she reminded herself. Not a doctor, not a soldier. When the doors to the infirmary slid open, the temperature dropped again, the air dense with antiseptic and ozone. Commander Hale stood near the observation glass, arms folded, his uniform pristine and his expression carved from stone. Beside him hovered Dr. Enro, the xenobiologist assigned to the dragon's care, her eyes sunken with exhaustion. You're late, Hale said without looking at her. In a meal shift, sir, Lira answered quietly. The commander nodded toward the containment room. He hasn't eaten in 12 hours. Same refusal pattern. We can't sedate him. His body chemistry rejects the compounds. Every nutrient drone he's destroyed. Dr. Enro believes. The scientist interrupted softly. He'll only accept organic delivery. From her. Her gaze met Lira's, a flicker of reluctant hope there. We think it's imprinting behavior. Possibly trust association from first contact during trauma. Lira's throat tightened. I can try. Good, Hale said curtly. He's weak, but still dangerous. Don't cross the barrier line unless he initiates contact. She nodded, taking the meal tray offered to her. Simple fare again, not the nutrient gel the medical staff had pushed unsuccessfully before. As the inner door opened, the world narrowed to the sound of her footsteps echoing against polished steel. The dragon was curled in the corner of his chamber, wings draped like torn fabric, scales dulled to a matte sheen. The golden restraint bands pulsed faintly where they met his skin. Lira approached slowly, every movement measured. "It's me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Lira, I brought food." One eye opened, violet and weary, its inner glow dim but aware. A faint vibration rolled through the air, a sound like the distant hum of engines. She knelt near the edge of the barrier, setting the tray down, then lifted a morsel in her fingers. For a moment, nothing. Then the dragon stirred, nostrils flaring. He exhaled, and the air rippled faintly with heat. Slowly, the massive head lowered until the ridged snout hovered inches from her hand. His breath carried a strange scent, ash, iron, and something floral. Carefully, he took the food from her fingers, the tip of his tongue grazing her palm in an almost deliberate gentleness. The sensors in the ceiling flickered. Dr. Enro's voice crackled through the intercom. Heart rate stabilizing, neural flux decreasing. Lira barely heard her. She was staring into that single eye, wondering why it didn't look monstrous. It looked lonely. Over the next few days, her visits became routine. Morning and evening feedings, short intervals of soft-spoken words. The dragon never spoke, but he began to move when she entered, adjusting his coils to face her. He watched her hands with something like fascination. Occasionally, he'd tilt his head as if listening to the rhythm of her heart. By the fourth day, Commander Hale had authorized brief physical contact under close surveillance. He won't let anyone else near him, Enro had argued. If we're to learn anything, she's the bridge. Hale had grumbled but agreed. Lira had stepped inside the containment ring for the first time, the sensation like stepping through a field of static. The dragon scales weren't smooth as she'd imagined. They were warm, almost velvety beneath a thin layer of crystalline dust. He had scars along his flank, metallic burns that pulsed faintly when he breathed. When her fingers brushed one, he tensed, a low growl rumbling deep within his chest. She froze, whispering, "It's okay. You're safe." To her surprise, the growl faded. He blinked once, slowly like a nod. Outside the glass, Dr. Enro murmured, "Unbelievable." That night, back in her quarters, Lira couldn't sleep. The images kept replaying, the wounds, the heat, the intelligence in those eyes. What did it mean for a creature of myth to yield to her? She had grown up hearing of the Draconic fleets, their fire cutting through cities, their voices like thunder. Yet here he was, bound and silent, dying slowly because he refused all but her touch. She sat on her bunk and stared at her hands. They still tingled faintly, as if the air itself remembered his warmth. The next morning, alarms shattered the station's routine. Lira rushed into the corridor, colliding with a medic who shouted something about containment breach. She followed the stream of personnel toward the infirmary. Smoke curled from the doorway, acrid and metallic. The barrier lights flickered erratically. Commander Hale stood outside, barking orders. "Lockdown Section 3. Get me containment reinforcements." Lira's heart pounded. What happened? The restraints failed. Hale snapped. "He's destabilizing." Radiation surge off the charts. A thunderous roar cut through the alarms. The sound wasn't one of fury, but agony. Without thinking, Lira pushed past the guards. "Lira, stop." Hale's voice barely reached her through the din. The doors hissed open, and she was met with a rush of heat. The dragon thrashed weakly, golden chains melting against his hide. Energy arced across his wings, and his breaths came ragged and wet. She stumbled forward, shouting his name. Though he had none she knew, the word tore from her anyway. "Please, stop, you'll hurt yourself." His head jerked toward her, wild light flaring behind his eyes. Then suddenly it dimmed. He went still, trembling, his chest heaving shallowly. She stepped closer, ignoring the searing air. "You're safe. Look at me. Please." His gaze locked on hers, and a voice, Not sound, but vibration, filled her skull. "Little one, you came." Lira gasped, stumbling backward. You can speak?" "Not speak. Remember, the bond wakes when the heart nears its end." Her pulse hammered. "You're dying." "I was dying," the voice corrected gently. "Now I am remembering life. Through you." The golden restraints flickered, then fell apart like dust. She expected him to lash out, to flee, but instead he bowed his head, pressing his snout against the floor near her feet. The chains had burned deep grooves into his flesh. The sight made her throat ache. "Let me help you," she whispered, kneeling beside him. "You need rest, not pain. Your world fears what it does not know. They will not let me live." "They will," she said, though she wasn't sure if she believed it. "I'll make them." The intercom crackled again. Hale's voice was taut. "Lira, move away. Security team en route." The dragon's eyes flared. "They bring fire again. I will not burn for them." "Please," she begged, placing both hands on his muzzle. The warmth pulsed through her palms, not painful this time. Alive, rhythmic like a heartbeat syncing with her own. "Trust me." The trembling ceased. He exhaled slowly, wings folding tight. The energy discharges stopped. When the guards burst in, rifles raised, they found only Lira kneeling beside the dragon, her eyes wide but calm, her hands still on his face. Commander Hale froze in the doorway. "What did you do?" Lira swallowed. "I told him to trust me." Hale's gaze flicked between her and the now-dormant dragon. "You realize what this means?" She shook her head. "It means," he said slowly, "you may be the only person keeping the last of his kind alive." As medbots swarmed around the chamber, Lira met the dragon's gaze again. His voice brushed her thoughts one last time before fading into silence. "Then I am in your hands, little one. Do not let me fall again." The hum of the station returned, softer now, as if the entire structure exhaled in relief. But Lira felt none. She knew this was only the beginning, because no one, not even Commander Hale, would let something this powerful rest for long. And somewhere, deep within the dragon's chest, a faint new rhythm began to pulse in time with her own. The next morning, the station felt different, quieter, like a breath held. Lira noticed it first in the cafeteria line, where conversations stumbled and eyes turned toward her before darting away. She kept her head down, serving trays with mechanical precision. Every so often, she caught her reflection in the metal counter. Hair escaping its tie, a faint red mark along her wrist where the dragon's warmth had brushed her. She hadn't told anyone about the voice in her mind. That was hers alone, something fragile that might shatter if exposed. Still, whispers followed her down the corridors. Dragon whisper, beast tamer, lucky fool. None of them knew how little luck felt like safety. Commander Hale summoned her again by midday. The security checkpoint was tighter this time. More armed personnel, heavier armor. Through the transparent barrier, the dragon lay still but unchained. His wings rose and fell slowly, each breath fogging the reinforced glass with faint plumes of light. Hale stood beside Dr. Enro, their voices clipped and weary. When Lira approached, Hale's gaze was unreadable. "He's stable," he said, "but scans show regenerative activity beyond our models. If he recovers, containment will be impossible." Dr. Enro added softly, "He's metabolizing something new. We think it's energy he's drawing from you." Lira blinked. "From me? Your presence alters his neural field," Enro explained. "Like resonance. You calm him, and he heals faster." They brought her inside the observation room again. The dragon's eye opened at once, focusing on her as though the rest of the room ceased to exist. Lira hesitated at the threshold before stepping forward. "Hi again," she murmured. The air shimmered faintly around him, a low hum vibrating against her ribs. "You returned. The storm quiets." The words were soundless but warm, brushing her mind like a sigh. She smiled faintly. "I promised I'd keep you safe." He blinked slowly, the alien gesture almost human. "They fear me still." "Maybe," she said, "but they're learning." She wasn't sure she believed that either. When she offered food, he accepted more eagerly than before. the tips of his teeth glinting as he nipped gently from her palm. The heat rolling off him no longer burned. It comforted. She dared to rest her hand briefly along his jawline, tracing the seam of scales where color shifted from obsidian to violet. His muscles relaxed under her touch, and for a moment she felt his heartbeat, deep, rhythmic thunder muffled by distance. Outside the glass, Hale exchanged a glance with Enro. The commander's voice cut through the intercom. "Lira, step back. That's close enough." She obeyed, though reluctance lingered like gravity. Later, in the debrief room, Hale paced. "We can't maintain this situation. If he bonds exclusively to you, we lose control of the asset." The word made her flinch. "He's not an asset," she said. Hale stopped. "He's a weapon, whether he knows it or not. If command learns he's responsive, they'll requisition him for military study." Dr. Enro looked pained, but didn't contradict him. "Then don't tell them," Lira said quietly. The room went still. Hale's jaw tightened. "You don't understand the stakes." "No," she replied. "You don't understand him." Something in her tone froze his retort. After a moment, he dismissed her, muttering about security protocols. Lira left with her pulse still racing. The next few days blurred into ritual, feeding, observation, whispered exchanges that danced between thought and sound. The dragon's name surfaced one evening when his thoughts brushed hers like mist over stone. "My kind call me Sereth." She repeated it aloud, savoring the unfamiliar syllables. "Sereth." The word thrummed through the chamber, and he lifted his head, pleased. "You speak true. Few tongues shape it cleanly." She laughed softly. "I've served enough picky engineers. Pronunciation's easy." The dragon's eyelid lowered in what she swore was amusement. He told her fragments in fleeting pulses, memories of burning skies, of promises broken between species meant to share the stars. Each image left her dizzy with color and sorrow. One night, a power fluctuation plunged the infirmary into near darkness. Emergency lights flickered red, shadows cutting across the dragon's scales. Lira heard the low rumble before the alarm sounded, reactors straining under unknown interference. Technicians shouted through comms. Hale's voice barked orders. When sparks rained from the ceiling grid, Lira instinctively moved toward the containment cell. "Lira, stay back," someone yelled. But she saw Sereth convulsing, arcs of violet light crawling over his body. Pain surged through her head like static. "The field, breaking. Help." His plea was fragmented, raw. She pressed her palm to the barrier, ignoring the sting. "I'm here. Focus on me." The roaring hum steadied, then slowed. His breathing calmed as lights stabilized. When systems returned, Hale's face appeared pale behind the glass. "What did you do?" She could only shake her head. "He called me." I answered. After that incident, command intervention was inevitable. Officers in black insignia arrived from the Central Fleet, strategic operations, silent and cold. They questioned Lira for hours, probing every detail of her contact. She answered carefully, omitting the telepathic bond. They spoke of transferring the dragon to an off-site facility once he regained strength. The thought of Sereth locked away again made her stomach twist. When they finally dismissed her, she returned to the cafeteria, hands trembling too badly to serve. Ferris tried to joke, "You look like you've wrestled a reactor core," but she only smiled faintly. In truth, she felt like she'd wrestled a promise. That evening, she went back to the infirmary despite orders restricting access. The guard recognized her and hesitated only a moment before stepping aside. Perhaps pity, perhaps fear. Inside, Sereth stirred as she entered. The faint light glowed along his scales once more. "They wish to move me." "I know," she whispered. "They fear what they made." "You mean what they broke?" Silence, then a deep exhale that rattled the floor. "Will you come if they take me?" She hesitated. "They won't tell me where." "Then I will find you." The certainty in his tone chilled and comforted her all at once. She sat beside him until the lights dimmed for night cycle. Through the viewport, Earth shimmered like a sapphire below, silent and distant. "You don't belong in chains," she said softly. "Nor do you, yet you wear them made of rules." His thought made her laugh, though tears followed. "Maybe," she admitted. But I can't let them hurt you again. Then we must learn to stand together. His eyes glowed faintly, reflecting her face like twin stars. For the first time, she sensed not only his pain, but his hope, a fragile, dangerous thing. The hum of the station deepened as systems entered low-power mode. Lira leaned against the glass, exhaustion overtaking her. Sareth lowered his head close to the barrier, breath fogging the surface. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw beyond it. Mountains of obsidian, skies streaked with molten gold, a world rebuilt from ruin. When she blinked, only the sterile infirmary remained. Still, she smiled. Tomorrow, she whispered. He rumbled softly in reply. Outside, unseen by both, a transmission left the station, encoded and urgent, marked for military command. Lira woke to the sharp vibration of distant alarms. The station's artificial night dissolved into pulsing red light that painted her walls like blood. Her console blinked with the security seal of command. A transfer order scrolled across the screen. Sareth to be removed at 0500 hours. No explanation, only coordinates that meant nothing to her. She sat upright, heart racing, the taste of metal in her mouth. Around her, the hum of the station felt heavier, as though the air itself disapproved. She dressed quickly, fingers clumsy against the uniform clasp, and slipped into the corridor before reason could stop her. The infirmary was already swarming with technicians in gray uniforms. Portable stabilizers hovered around the containment bay, and the golden chains had been replaced with dense energy clamps that buzzed angrily in the dim light. Commander Hale stood at the forefront, giving clipped instructions. When Lira pushed through the crowd, his expression darkened. "You're not supposed to be here." She ignored him. "You can't move him. He's still healing." Hale's jaw tightened. Orders came from Central Command. "He's leaving within the hour." She took a step closer. "He'll die if you take him." "That's not your decision," he snapped, but his voice faltered when Sareth's growl rolled through the chamber like thunder under glass. The dragon's eyes locked on Lira the instant she appeared. The clamps glowed brighter, reacting to his rising pulse. Energy crackled across the floor, scattering the nearest medbots. Lira didn't think. She ran to the barrier, pressing her hands flat against the trembling field. "Sareth, listen to me. Breathe." His wings twitched violently, sparks bursting from each joint. "They will break me again." The voice seared through her skull, filled with pain and fury. "No one's breaking you," she said, forcing calm into her tone. "You're not alone anymore." The hum steadied fractionally, enough for the crew to back away. Hale swore under his breath. "We can't control him when she's here, but we can't control him without her either." Dr. Enro approached quietly. "Commander, the readings, his vitals align with her neural patterns. Separate them now, and both could destabilize." Hale stared at the graphs flashing on her tablet, then at Lira. "You're saying if we sedate him, she might collapse," Enro finished grimly. For a moment, silence reigned except for the crackle of power. Hale exhaled through his teeth. "Fine. She goes with the escort team. If this goes wrong, it's on her." Lira hardly heard the words. All she saw was Sareth's trembling form, the glow beneath his scales dimming to a painful gray. She whispered, "I'll stay with you, I promise." The answer brushed her mind, softer now. "Then I will endure." They moved through the docking corridor under heavy guard. The transport bay reeked of coolant and fear. Through the viewport, Lira saw the transfer vessel waiting, sleek, silver, the insignia of Central Command etched along its hull. Sareth was guided on a grav sled surrounded by containment drones. Every step he took shook the deck plates. Lira walked beside him, matching his pace, ignoring the rifles trained on them both. "Keep your head down," one soldier muttered, voice muffled behind his visor. She didn't. Her eyes stayed on Sareth, on the faint rise and fall of his chest. Each breath seemed to cost him more. Halfway to the airlock, the deck lights flickered again. A high-pitched whine filled the corridor, the kind that meant power routing error or deliberate sabotage. The next instant, the gravity field spasmed. The grav sled lurched sideways, smashing against the bulkhead. Soldiers shouted. One was thrown clear, another hit the floor hard. Lira stumbled, catching herself on a railing. Sparks cascaded from the ceiling as emergency barriers slammed down, sealing the corridor in sections. She heard Hale over the comms shouting for lockdown, but static drowned him out. When the smoke cleared, Sereth was no longer bound. He stood amid the wreckage, wings half spread, eyes burning like molten violet. The clamps hung broken, metal sizzling where his energy had melted through. Soldiers raised their weapons. "Don't!" Lira screamed. But it was too late. Stun bolts arced across the space. They hit his hide and dispersed harmlessly, the light dying before it reached the second layer of his scales. His answering roar made the air shudder. She threw herself between him and the soldiers, hands outstretched. "Stop! He's not attacking." For one breathless moment, everything froze. The heat, the noise, the smell of ozone thick enough to choke. Then Sereth lowered his wings, the fury in his gaze dimming to something like sorrow. They would cage the sun to light their halls. His voice was steady again, resonating deep in her bones. But the sun does not belong in chains. Lira felt tears sting her eyes. "Then run," she whispered. "Go before they kill you." He stared at her for a long heartbeat. "You would stay behind? Someone has to make them understand." "No, not alone." His chest glowed, a rising pulse that filled the corridor with violet fire. Energy arced outward, bending around her like a shield. The pressure lifted her from the floor, yet she felt no pain, only warmth, and the echo of his heartbeat synchronized with her own. When the light faded, the soldiers lay unconscious, unharmed but silent. The doors ahead melted open in a shower of molten metal. Sereth lowered his head to her level. "Come." Lira hesitated only a second before climbing onto the ridge between his shoulders, the scales smooth and hot beneath her palms. The world tilted as he crouched, wings tensing like drawn steel. "We'll never make it through the hull," she gasped. "Watch." With one powerful thrust, he launched forward, wings slicing through the heavy air. The corridor dissolved into brilliance. The external doors yielded like paper before a surge of energy she felt more than saw. Then the stars swallowed them, cold and infinite. The vacuum should have killed her, but it didn't. A shimmering cocoon surrounded them, woven from the same radiant force that once bound him. Inside it, her breath came easy. The curve of the orbital station receded rapidly below, a scar of silver against the black. "Sereth," she whispered, clutching the ridge as gravity fell away. "Where will we go?" "Home," he replied, "or what remains of it. There is something you must see." Ahead, a distant point of light flared, a forgotten world adrift near the debris fields of the old war. She could feel his exhaustion, the weakening pulse beneath the power that sustained them. "You're hurt," she said, "not from bolts, from remembering." His thoughts quivered like old glass. They descended through thin clouds of ionized dust, and the planet came into view, half shrouded in twilight, half gleaming with crystalline seas. Great scars crossed its continents, ancient battlefields now overgrown with silver grass. Sereth landed amid ruins, shaped like enormous wings carved from stone. The moment his claws touched soil, the cocoon collapsed, leaving only wind and silence. Lira slid down carefully, legs trembling. The air smelled of rain and ash. "Is this your world?" she asked. "What is left of it?" "The fires you called war burned until even our skies fell. Yet life hides in the cracks." He looked toward the horizon where faint lights flickered, living embers of something reborn. Lira reached out and laid a hand on his flank. The heat was weaker now, fading. "We'll keep it alive," she said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "We'll start over." Sereth tilted his head, the faintest hint of amusement coloring his mental tone. A cafeteria worker rebuilding worlds. She smiled through the ache in her chest. Someone has to feed hope, right? The dragon's laughter was like distant thunder rolling across empty mountains. "Then let us begin." The wind on Sereth's ruined world tasted of salt and ash. Lira stood beside the dragon, her boots sinking slightly into glittering dust that once might have been a city's bones. The horizon shimmered with heat, distant structures leaning like broken ribs against a bruised sky. She hugged her arms around herself, the thin fabric of her station, uniform no match for the strange cold that followed each gust. Saratha's wings folded close, scales dim but still faintly luminous, a living furnace struggling against exhaustion. "It's quiet," she whispered. "Too quiet," he agreed, the thought brushing her like smoke. The silence of memory. His gaze lingered on the ruins as if reading ghosts written in stone. They spent the first hours exploring what was left of a vast plaza. Shattered columns rose from the ground, each carved with flowing symbols that pulsed weakly when Saratha's shadow touched them. Lira traced one pattern with her gloved fingers. "They react to you. They remember the blood of their maker. The crystal veins once carried our fire." He lowered his head, breath stirring dust. "Now they bleed only light." She looked up at him. "Can you restore them?" His eyes, deep amethyst, now fading toward gray, met hers. "Perhaps, but not alone." She smiled faintly. "Then it's a good thing you're not alone." The idea of a cafeteria worker repairing a world should have felt absurd, yet under this alien sun, it felt like purpose. They built a shelter at the edge of the plaza using fragments of hull and fallen stone. Sarath showed her how to draw warmth from the ground, pockets of residual energy that responded to touch. When she pressed her palm to the surface, a gentle pulse thrummed beneath her skin, feeding small lights that danced like fireflies around their camp. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "This was our hearth magic," Sarath said. "Not weapon, not shield, only warmth. Your kind called it radiation. We called it life." Lira laughed softly. Guess our definitions were always off. For the first time since his fall, she heard something like amusement in his answering rumble. As days passed, they found signs of renewal. Vines with silver leaves coiled through cracks in the masonry, drawing moisture from the mist that rose at dawn. Lira gathered seeds the wind carried, tiny spheres that glowed faintly when touched. When she planted them near their shelter, Sarath watched intently. "Why do you labor for soil, not your own?" "Because life deserves help, wherever it tries to grow," she said. "Even dragons once believed that. We forgot it when war made hunger easier than hope." His words carried regret that settled heavy between them. She knelt beside his foreleg, resting a hand against the rough warmth. "Then we'll remember for you." Each evening, they shared quiet stories. Lira told him about the orbital cafeteria, the chaos of lunch rushes, the burnt stew fiasco that nearly cost her job, the laughter that somehow survived bureaucracy. Sarath listened with curiosity that felt almost childlike. "You fed armies of workers with patience," he mused. "No wonder you tamed me." She chuckled. "You're hardly tamed." "Perhaps, but I am nourished." The pause that followed was intimate, filled with unspoken gratitude. She found herself looking at his eyes longer than necessary, drawn by the faint shimmer of starlight trapped within. One night, distant thunder rolled across the plain, not natural, not weather. Saratha's head lifted sharply. Engines. Lira's heart lurched. She climbed a fragment of column and saw faint red beacons cutting through the clouds, shuttle lights descending fast. "They found us." "Command sent," Sarath growled. "They bring cages again." "We can't fight them," she said, panic rising. "Then we hide." He lowered his body so she could climb on. The ground trembled as he spread his wings, launching them into the ashen sky. Wind tore at her hair as ruins blurred beneath them. The shiplights multiplied, searching beams sweeping the surface like hungry eyes. They dove into a canyon carved by old rivers, the walls glimmering with residual crystal veins. Sarath folded his wings and landed hard, scattering dust. Their sensors will struggle here. The minerals sing too loud. Lira slid off his back, knees shaking. How long can we stay hidden? Until they forget where to look? Or until you choose otherwise? Choose what? To show them what humanity truly is. You carry fire they cannot measure. She frowned. I'm no soldier, nor was I once. Yet I learned. So will you. The certainty in his tone left no room for doubt. They sheltered in the canyon's hollow for 3 days, surviving on mineral water and the few rations Lira still carried. At night, the crystals hummed softly, resonating with Sereth's slow breathing. She discovered that when she sang, a habit from long shifts in the cafeteria, the stones brightened, echoing her voice with delicate harmonics. Sereth listened in stillness. Your music heals. It carries structure. It's just humming, she said shyly. To you, to the world, it is repair. He closed his eyes, letting the vibrations pass through his chest. For the first time, Lira sensed the planet responding, a faint tremor underfoot, as if the soil remembered joy. On the 4th morning, drones found them. Tiny metallic spheres drifted down the canyon, scanning beams flickering. Sereth moved to shield her, but she stopped him. Wait, let me try. She stepped forward into the light, raising both hands. I know you're watching, she said, voice steady. I'm Lira Vance. The being you call Sereth isn't your enemy. He's proof we don't have to be destroyers. Static answered her, then a mechanical voice. Human subject unauthorized. Surrender asset. She took a breath. He's not an asset. He's a survivor, and so am I. Before they could react, Sereth unleashed a low-frequency roar that shattered every drone into harmless fragments of light. When the silence returned, Lira turned to him, heart pounding. They'll send more. Then we move again. But your defiance is weight. Even machines heard it. She exhaled shakily. If command wants war again, what can 2 of us do? More than you think. You remind them of hunger and of mercy. He spread his wings, dark against the pale sky. Come, little one. The world remembers. Let's wake it. The canyon opened gradually into a valley veined with pale rivers of light. Each stream pulsed faintly, as if the planet itself carried a heartbeat. Sereth walked beside Lira now, instead of towering above her, his massive body hunched from exhaustion. The once polished scales along his shoulders were cracked, glowing faintly where energy leaked through. Lira matched his pace, careful not to stumble on the jagged terrain. You're getting weaker, she said. I'm spreading thin, he admitted. My fire binds to this world's core again. It takes strength to wake a heart long dead. She bit her lip. Then let me help. You already do. Each word you speak stirs warmth where silence ruled. They reached a ridge where the wind blew warmer. Below lay a field of crystalline pods half buried in the sand. They pulsed dimly, synchronized with Sereth's breath. What are they? Lira whispered. Eggs, he said softly, voice tinged with awe. Dormant since the fall. I thought none survived. He stepped forward, talons brushing the edge of one crystal. A faint spark flickered inside, an echo of life. They're alive, she murmured. Barely. They need energy, and I have little left. Lira pressed her hand to the nearest pod. The surface was cool, smooth, and it shivered beneath her touch. What about the resonance we found in the canyon? Maybe I can channel it. You would offer your life's pulse for ours. You said it yourself. I'm fire too, in my own way. Together, they began a ritual neither fully understood. Sereth curled his tail around the cluster, wings half unfurled, and released a slow exhalation that shimmered like liquid flame. Lira knelt, placing both palms on the ground. She hummed the melody that had brightened the crystals before. The tone grew stronger, vibrating through her bones. Light flared beneath the sand, coursing outward in ripples. The eggs responded, glowing brighter, one by one. Sereth's eyes widened. They answer. Keep singing, little one. Her voice wavered, but did not break. She felt warmth rushing from her chest into the soil, the song shaping itself into words she didn't know, but somehow remembered. Hours passed before the light steadied. When she finally stopped, her vision swam with color. Sereth bent his head, his breath warm on her cheek. You did it. They stir again. We did it, she whispered, smiling weakly. Around them, the pods flickered with soft life, each pulse a heartbeat against despair. The dragon's wings folded protectively over the field. For the first time since their escape, hope felt solid enough to touch. Their triumph was short-lived. Distant streaks crossed the upper sky, Dropships, sleek and dark. Lira's stomach tightened. Command didn't give up. They smell rebirth and fear it. Then we protect them. She looked at the glowing field. These eggs can't be moved yet, can they? No. Their shells must finish drinking the light. If I fight, they will fade. Lira clenched her fists. Then I'll stall them. You cannot stand against machines. Maybe not, but I can make them hesitate. The thought of facing soldiers again terrified her, yet a calm resolve took root. She'd fed thousands in chaos before. Now she would feed courage itself. When the first dropship landed at the valley's rim, dust spiraled into the air. Armored figures emerged, weapons gleaming. Lira walked forward alone, hands raised. The officer at their front leveled his rifle. Identify yourself. Lira Vance, civilian worker, she said. You're trespassing on restricted territory. No, she replied, voice steady. You're trespassing on the future. Confusion rippled through the line. The officer gestured, and a calm drone hovered closer, recording. The creature you harbor is property of Central Command. Lira shook her head. He's not property, he's life. And he's not alone anymore. Before the officer could answer, the ground vibrated. Sareth rose behind her, immense and radiant, his body outlined in violet fire. The soldiers stumbled back, their rifles trembling. He did not roar this time. Instead, his voice carried directly into their minds, deep and steady. You seek to bind what you cannot comprehend. Look upon your reflection and choose mercy. Some fell to their knees, clutching helmets as his words echoed through them. Lira stood at his side, the heat swirling harmlessly around her. The officer shouted orders, but no one fired. She stepped closer to him, lowering her voice. We can end this cycle. Help us, not fight us. Something in her tone, gentle, pleading, human, broke through the fear. The officer hesitated, eyes flicking between her and the dragon. Then he lowered his weapon. One by one, the others followed. The humming air subsided, replaced by a strange stillness. Saratha's glow dimmed slightly, his body trembling with effort. They yield. For now. That's enough, she whispered. Rest. He nodded slowly, sinking back to the ground as the soldiers withdrew to their ships. Engines roared, lifting dust, and then the valley was theirs again. When silence returned, Lira sat beside him, exhaustion pressing at her limbs. The eggs continued to glow, steady and serene. They believe me, she said softly. They believe truth. Words are stronger than chains. She smiled faintly. You sound like someone who's learning humanity, or remembering it. He turned one weary eye toward her. When these young ones hatch, what will you do? Teach them what I taught you, she said. How to trust, how to share food, how not to burn the world. His chest rumbled with quiet amusement. Then perhaps your kind was sent to remind mine. Night fell slowly on the valley. Stars appeared, reflected in the shimmering pods like a constellation reborn on the ground. Lira leaned against Saratha's side, feeling his heartbeat slow beneath her ear. The air was warm again, not from fire but from life. You'll heal, she murmured. So will you. We both were broken tools. Now we build instead of destroy. Her eyes grew heavy, his words blending with the rhythmic pulse of the eggs. As she drifted toward sleep, she thought she heard faint rustling within the crystals, new voices preparing to breathe. Dawn crept over the valley like liquid gold poured across glass. Lira stirred from where she'd fallen asleep against Saratha's side, her hair tangled, uniform streaked with dust. The eggs still glowed softly, their light pulsing with the same slow rhythm as the dragon's breath. When she stood, the air smelled faintly of rain and metal. The planet felt alive now, whispering, shifting. They grow while we dream, Sarath murmured, voice rough with fatigue yet tinged with wonder. She smiled faintly. Then we'll keep dreaming for them. He lowered his head, eyes half closed. You'll have to guide them when I fade. Her pulse jumped. Don't talk like that. Even stars rest when their light finds new keepers. She refused to accept it, but she saw how his wings drooped heavier each morning, how his once bright scales dulled along the edges. The energy he'd poured into the planet had cost him. Still, he moved among the nests, humming a resonance that steadied the tiny heartbeats inside. Lira followed, noting each pod's pulse with a careful hand. "They're stronger today," she said, "because you stayed." His reply carried a warmth that tightened her throat. She busied herself collecting the silver-leafed vines that crept across the rocks. When burned, they produced vapor dense enough to mask heat signatures. If command returned, they would need cover. Her cafeteria training had taught her little about war, but everything about preparation. By noon, the sky shimmered with heat mirages. Lira had learned to find water where mist condensed between crystal shards. Saratha's tongue could carve channels through stone, releasing streams that glowed pale blue. She filled canisters and filtered them through fabric. The dragon watched her with quiet amusement. "You command elements now," she laughed, brushing sweat from her forehead. "Just borrowing tricks. That is what your kind excels at, borrowing, adapting, surviving." He looked toward the horizon. "It is why you won the war." She hesitated. "We didn't win. Everyone lost." The silence that followed agreed with her. That evening, a strange tremor rippled through the valley. The eggs vibrated in unison, their shells brightening until the light hurt to look at. Lira shielded her eyes. "What's happening?" "They hear something beyond us." "A call." "From who?" "From what remains of the void flock, their kin scattered in orbit." My blood remembers them. His wings quivered, sending sparks into the air. "If they return, this world may breathe again or burn once more." Lira swallowed hard. "Then we have to make sure it's the first one." She checked the crude sensors she'd scavenged from her suit. Frequencies spiked across every channel. "They're coming," she whispered. Saratha's gaze sharpened. Then we prepare to greet them with mercy, not fear. Night fell swift and electric. The stars burned unusually bright, each one a promise or a threat. Lira set up signal beacons along the ridge, encoding a simple message: "Peace alive, do not attack." It felt absurd, but it was all she had. She could almost hear Ferris back on the station laughing at the idea of a cafeteria worker negotiating with dragons. Yet her hands were steady. Sarath watched her assemble the transmitter, admiration soft in his tone. "You craft meaning from scraps." "That's what cooks do," she said. "We make something edible out of whatever's left. Then make hope edible, little one. They will need to taste it." When the first shapes entered atmosphere, their descent painted streaks of silver fire. Each vessel resembled a fragment of crystal grown into motion, wings of refracted light beating against gravity. Lyra's breath caught. "They're beautiful. They were meant to be. Our ships were living metal, half heart, half storm." He spread his wings despite exhaustion, scales flaring to mirror their glow. "They will recognize the pattern and know I yet breathe." The sky filled with resonant hums that set the valley trembling. Lira clutched his foreleg. "They might not all be friendly. Neither were your people once. Yet you came to feed me. That was enough." The first craft landed near the valley rim, its hull folding open like petals revealing eyes of blue flame. Figures emerged, smaller dragons, translucent and sleek, their forms half energy. They circled warily, scenting the air. One emitted a harsh cry that made the eggs flicker. Sarah stepped forward, wings half raised in greeting. "Children of Ash," I returned. "The war is done." The newcomers hesitated, their eyes narrowing. Lyra's translator implant crackled from overload. The air itself carried the meaning. "Traitor to flame," one hissed. "You bow to the fleshborn." She flinched, but Saratha's voice thundered through the valley. "I bow to life. Stand down." The confrontation teetered on a blade's edge. Lyra's heart pounded so loudly she feared they'd hear it. The smaller dragons encircled them, light spines bristling. She raised her hand slowly. "We're not enemies." Her voice trembled, but did not break. "We want to heal what's left." The lead dragon's gaze fixed on her, slitted eyes narrowing. "You carry his scent. You changed him." "Maybe," she said, "but he changed me too." For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then the lead one exhaled, releasing a hiss that softened to a sigh. "Show us the heartbeat you guard, fleshborn." Lira stepped aside, revealing the glowing field. The sight drew a murmur of awe even from creatures forged of light. They moved closer, their luminous talons brushing the sand without leaving marks. Sereth bowed his head, fatigue nearly toppling him. They are young. Let them see and remember what we almost lost. Lira knelt beside him, touching his shoulder. Rest, I'll handle it. She guided the nearest dragon toward the nests, explaining with gestures, letting her calm fill the space words could not. The aliens lowered their heads to the eggs, their bodies dimming to match the gentle glow. Harmony filled the air, a resonance that lifted the hairs on her arms. For the first time, dragon and human stood side by side without fear. When the pulse subsided, Sereth sagged, his glow flickering dangerously low. Lira caught his muzzle, panic flooding her chest. Hey, stay with me. Do not weep, he whispered. This is how stars end, by giving light. You're not ending, she cried. Then promise me, Lira Vance, you'll keep feeding them. The world, the young, yourself. Promise. Her voice broke. I promise. His massive body relaxed, warmth fading to a steady thrum. Around them, the newcomers watched silently, as though recognizing a passing of fire from one soul to many. The glow around Sereth dimmed until it matched the pale light of dawn. Lira sat beside his great head, her hands pressed to the cooling scales, listening to the faint hum that remained beneath them. The younger dragons moved silently through the valley, touching their snouts to his wings as if paying tribute. None spoke aloud. The sound of their movements was enough, a chorus of breath, wind, and heartbeat. You can't leave me, she whispered. His eye opened slightly, a shard of violet lingering in the dimness. I am not leaving. I am changing. My flame will rest in the shells of those who wake. You'll come back with them. In every voice, in every meal shared without fear. That is how gods fade, by becoming stories that feed others. The eggs began to crack. The sound was fragile, like frost breaking underfoot. Lira wiped her eyes and turned toward them. Slivers of crystal peeled away, releasing vapor that shimmered like morning dew. Tiny forms emerged, dragons the size of her arms, translucent and trembling. Their first breaths filled the air with light, their cries harmonizing in notes that resonated against the valley walls. The elder dragons bowed their heads. Even the wind seemed to still. Lira stepped closer, reaching out a tentative hand. One hatchling stumbled toward her and pressed its small forehead to her palm. Warmth flooded through her skin, gentle but undeniable. It knows you, Sereth murmured faintly. You sang its heart awake. She knelt, laughing and crying all at once as more hatchlings gathered around. Their wings flickered like candle flames, uncertain but bright. For a moment, everything, fear, war, loss, fell away, replaced by awe so deep it hurt to breathe. She looked back to Sereth, but his gaze had gone distant, fixed on the rising sun. Rest, she whispered. I'll keep your promise. The great dragon exhaled once, a sigh that rolled through the valley like a final tide. His body shimmered, edges dissolving into threads of light that drifted upward, scattering among the newborns. When a last glimmer faded, only warmth remained, woven into the air itself. The younger dragons lifted their heads, crying out in unison, a song of inheritance. Hours passed before she realized she was no longer alone in her grief. The smallest dragons had clustered close, their scales glowing faintly where they touched her. When she rose, they followed, awkward but determined. The elder dragons approached, their leader lowering his head. The fire has passed to you, fleshborn. What will you do with it? Lira swallowed hard. Feed it, she said simply. Not with conquest, just care. The leader's eyes narrowed, then softened. Then you are kin. He turned, spreading wings that caught the new sunlight. The others followed, carrying the hatchlings in gentle claws toward the mountains that gleamed in the distance. Lira watched them go, her heart heavy yet full. Days turned into weeks. She remained in the valley, tending what Sereth had begun. The vines she'd planted now covered the ruins, their silver leaves reflecting both moon and starlight. Pools of crystal water collected around the nests, nourishing the ground until flowers of pale gold bloomed between shards of old war machines. She built stone markers where Sereth had once lain, carving them with symbols she learned from the dragons: fire, unity, memory. Each night, when the sky deepened, she thought she heard his voice carried on the wind. "Keep feeding them, little one." She would smile then, whispering back, "Always." Human ships eventually returned, but not with soldiers. Scouts sent by command landed cautiously, their sensors confused by the energy bloom surrounding the valley. When they saw her alive, surrounded by growing dragons that no longer roared in anger, they lowered their weapons. Reports spread quickly of coexistence, of miracles where annihilation had ruled. Lira helped them build communication relays, teaching both species simple gestures of peace. She laughed at the absurdity of it all, a cafeteria worker explaining diplomacy to generals and hatchlings alike. But it worked. Food and trust spoke a universal language. The years that followed remade history. Dragons rebuilt their sky cities with human engineers beside them. Stations once meant for war became trading hubs glowing with shared light. The valley became a sanctuary, its heart marked by a single stone where Lira would sit and remember. She never left, though many asked her to. "Someone has to keep the fire fed," she would say, stirring the communal hearth each evening as young dragons curled nearby like enormous cats. They listened when she told stories of the stars, of a prince who refused to burn another world, of a friendship born from hunger and kindness. One night, as twin moons crossed overhead, she awoke to a soft glow outside her shelter. The air shimmered with familiar warmth. A tall, translucent figure waited, draconic yet shaped by memory, woven from light. "Sereth?" she whispered. The figure inclined its head. "Pardon me. A reflection. You kept your promise. You taught me how." "No, Lira Vance. Humanity taught itself, through you." He gestured toward the horizon where dragon and human lights now mingled. "We are both architects of survival. Tell your kind this. Empathy is not weakness. It is evolution." She nodded, tears streaking her face. "I will." The figure smiled, or perhaps the light bent kindly, and then it dissolved into the night, scattering like embers over the valley. Lira stood until the last spark vanished. Behind her, young dragons stirred, wings fluttering softly in their dreams. She looked to the stars that once carried war and whispered, "We fed hope," and it lived. The wind answered in a tone she could almost call laughter. The world exhaled, alive again. The air in the valley shimmered with quiet life. Lira knelt beside the communal hearth she'd built from fused crystal and stone, stirring the slow-burning coals that never fully cooled. The younger dragons lounged in the sunlight like living statues, their scales reflecting the blues and golds of morning. Some had already grown large enough to soar above the cliffs, wings carving new paths through the sky, while others still stumbled awkwardly on two small limbs. She smiled as one nudged another into the water channel, a splash of glittering mist rising like laughter. Every sound of play was a reminder that the world Sereth dreamed of had taken root. Yet beneath her joy lingered an ache she had learned not to name. When the wind shifted, it carried the scent of approaching visitors, metal, ozone, and human sweat. Lira rose, brushing dust from her hands as the figures crested the ridge. They came unarmed this time, two officers in pale expedition suits, their helmets open to the warm air. The lead woman raised a hand in greeting. "Director Vance?" Lira almost laughed at the title, but nodded anyway. "That's me, though the dragons just call me Lira." The woman smiled nervously, her gaze darting toward the giants resting nearby. "I'm Commander Yelling of the Peace Commission. We've come to review the treaty site and meet the next generation." Lira gestured to the valley around them. "You're already standing in it." The inspection was formal at first, measurements, energy readings, cautious questions, but it softened as the hours passed. Hatchlings pressed their snouts against scanner panels, curious about the blinking lights. One even tried to chew a data tablet, eliciting startled laughter. Yelling watched Lira move among them, soothing both species with effortless calm. "You seem to have built something more powerful than diplomacy," she said quietly. "A kitchen," Lira replied with a grin. "Every good piece starts where people share food." She opened a pot over the hearth, releasing a rich aroma of broth and mineral herbs. Yelling hesitated, then accepted a bowl. Around them, dragons hummed softly, a chorus of contentment. By evening, the visiting crew had joined the meal, their voices blending with the valley's natural rhythm. Someone played a small flute. A dragon mimicked the tune, deepening it into harmony. Lira sat back, watching with a kind of disbelief that still hadn't faded after all these years. "When I first got here," she said to Yelling, "I thought survival meant keeping the fires lit. Turns out it meant teaching others to tend them." The commander studied her. "You could return to the cities, you know. You'd be honored there." Lira shook her head gently. "This is where I belong. The dragons still need stories, and humans still need reminders." Yelling nodded as if she understood, though her eyes said she didn't. Not completely. That night, Lira climbed the ridge overlooking the valley. Below her, the crystal rivers pulsed faintly, reflecting constellations that had once guided fleets to war. She traced one star with her finger, the same that marked Saratha's home system long ago. "You'd like this, old friend," she whispered. The wind answered with warmth, curling around her hair like a familiar breath. She closed her eyes, letting the sound of hatching laughter and distant wings fill her ears. The ache inside her eased, replaced by quiet pride. Humanity and dragonkind had not erased their scars, but they had learned to live with them, and maybe that was the truest healing of all. In the months that followed, the valley became a crossroads. Engineers arrived with solar rigs and communication towers, careful to blend them into the natural landscape. Dragons helped lift materials, their strength balanced by surprising delicacy. Children from nearby colonies visited to study ecology and learn the old songs Lira taught, melodies that resonated with the planet's living crystals. She found herself teaching more than cooking: patience, empathy, the art of listening before speaking. The youngest dragons adored her, calling her Heartmender in their melodic tongue. It embarrassed her at first, but Saratha's memory always whispered through her doubt. "Feed them. Feed the fire that makes them kind." One morning, a tremor shook the horizon. Dust rose in spirals, and distant sensors blinked red. Lira hurried to the ridge, squinting into the haze. A storm approached, a rolling wall of light, plasma winds tearing through the upper atmosphere. The elder dragons spread their wings instinctively, forming a barrier over the nests. Yelling's voice crackled over comms from the outpost. "Magnetic surge incoming. We're grounding all ships, but the valley's exposed." Lyra's mind raced. The hearth, she thought, the core crystal beneath, it could channel power safely if activated properly. She sprinted downhill, calling orders that dragons and humans obeyed without question. For once, command felt like instinct. She reached the hearth and pressed her palms to its surface. The crystal responded instantly, flaring with energy that climbed her arms like living fire. "Come on, old magic," she whispered. "Don't let us burn." The light rippled outward, linking with the river veins and spreading through the valley in concentric waves. Dragons roared in unison, their voices merging with the rising hum. The plasma storm struck moments later, slamming against an invisible dome of energy that shimmered like a soap bubble. The impact rattled her bones, but the shield held. When silence finally fell, the sky glowed with auroras so brilliant they painted the ground in color. The hatchlings cheered in high-pitched trills. Even the humans stared in awe. Afterward, Yelling found her slumped beside the crystal, hands still smoking faintly from the heat. "You saved us," the commander said. Lira laughed weakly. "No, Sarath did. I just borrowed the recipe." She looked around at the valley, unharmed, vibrant, alive, and felt tears prick her eyes. In that moment, she understood what Sarath had meant about stars resting in new keepers. The fire he'd left behind wasn't just energy, It was trust, passed from scale to skin, from myth to memory. Humanity had finally learned to nurture what it once feared. That night, as the auroras still shimmered overhead, the dragons sang an old melody, one Lira had never taught them. Its rhythm pulsed with gratitude. Its notes carried fragments of Saratha's deep voice. She listened, hands clasped around a mug of broth, and let the sound wash through her. "I miss you," she whispered into the glow. The reply came not in words, but in warmth, the same quiet certainty that had once steadied her trembling hands in a sterile infirmary long ago. She smiled, closing her eyes against the light. The fire was safe. Weeks later, the auroras still rippled faintly across the night sky, threads of color woven into the planet's magnetosphere. They had become a permanent phenomenon. Scientists said the storm fused with Saratha's lingering energy, stabilizing the atmosphere. Lira preferred the dragon's explanation, that the sky now remembered him. She often woke before dawn to watch the first lights stretch over the valley, steaming cups of broth lined neatly beside her for any visitor who arrived early. Some mornings a hatchling would crawl into her lap, demanding stories. Other mornings, Yelene joined her, learning patience in silence. Peace was no longer an agreement on paper. It was a habit built day by day. One dawn, a group of children from the colonies arrived to study under her care. Their laughter carried across the ridges, fearless among creatures once used as weapons. Lira led them to the pools where dragons bathed and taught them how to read the patterns in the rippling reflections. "Every movement means something," she said. "It's how they speak without words." A small boy asked, "Did they really use to fight us?" She hesitated, watching a young dragon glide overhead, sunlight glinting off its wings. "Yes," she answered softly, "but not because they wanted to. They were scared, and so were we." The boy nodded solemnly, then reached out a hand as a hatchling approached. When the creature nuzzled his fingers, wonder erased every trace of fear. Lira smiled. That moment was worth every scar. The seasons turned gently here, more a shift in color than temperature. Crystals bloomed like flowers in spring, fading into blue by summer, and the air filled with the hum of growth. Lira spent her evenings writing in a thick-bound journal, recording not wars or politics but recipes, songs, and the lessons learned from dragonkind. Each entry began the same way. "Feed what you wish to keep alive." Her handwriting grew slower with age, but her words grew surer. Sometimes she wondered if anyone would read them centuries from now, or if the dragons would simply hum the stories into the wind. Either way, the message would survive. One evening, as she walked the perimeter of the valley, she noticed the smallest dragons gathered around the hearth, noses pressed close to the fire. The flames danced brighter in their presence, shifting hues like living emotion. When they saw her, they chirped excitedly. All right," she laughed, settling on the stone beside them. One last story before rest. The firelight painted her face in warm gold. "Once," she began, "there was a dragon who fell from the stars, broken and furious. And there was a girl who fed him because no one else dared." The hatchlings leaned closer, eyes wide. "He taught her that kindness is its own kind of power," she continued. "And she taught him that trust can heal even the oldest wounds." When she finished, silence settled, reverent, peaceful. The fire flickered, forming for an instant the shadow of vast wings before fading into embers. Years folded into decades. Lyra's hair silvered like the vines she once harvested, and fine lines marked her skin. The dragons never saw her as frail. To them, she glowed with the same steady warmth as the hearth. One crisp morning, Yelene, now gray-haired herself, arrived with a small delegation. They brought news of a festival to celebrate 50 years of peace. "They're naming it the Accord of Flame," Yelene said. "It's being held here, in your valley." Lira chuckled. "Then we'd better make sure the kitchen's ready." She oversaw preparations personally, organizing teams of humans and dragons who worked side by side. Massive cauldrons simmered with spice stew, and crystal tables shimmered beneath banners woven from both scales and cloth. As night fell, thousands gathered, humans, dragons, children of both legacies. They ate, sang, and danced until the stars themselves seemed to join in. When the celebration quieted, Lira stood before the hearth. The fire inside burned higher than it had in years, swirling in familiar violet hues. She addressed the crowd, her voice steady though her hands trembled. "I was never meant to lead," she said. "I just kept showing up. I fed a stranger, and it changed the world." The dragons rumbled softly in agreement. Humans listened with awe. "Peace," she continued, "isn't built by heroes. It's cooked, stirred, shared, one meal at a time. Remember that when the sky darkens again." She lifted a ladle high, and laughter rippled through the valley. For a moment, everyone felt the same heartbeat. Later, when the guests slept and only the coals glowed, Lira sat alone beside the hearth. Her breath came slow, her body weary but content. A familiar warmth surrounded her, gentle as memory. She closed her eyes and whispered, "I think I've done enough cooking for one life." The wind shifted, carrying the faint echo of a voice she knew by heart. "You've fed the universe, little one. Rest now." She smiled, leaning against the stone as the light grew softer. The fire dimmed, not in loss, but in fulfillment, its glow sinking into the earth to join the living network below. By dawn, the valley was hushed. Dragons moved quietly around the hearth, sensing what had passed. They did not mourn with wails, but with song, a low, resonant melody that rolled across the plains, reverent and tender. Humans joined them, voices trembling yet strong. The sun rose through silver mist, illuminating a new monument beside the fire, a single stone carved with intertwined hands and wings. Beneath it, an inscription in both tongues read, "She fed the stars." Generations later, travelers who came to the valley would still find the hearth burning. They said its flame never faded, fueled by unseen warmth that neither machine nor magic could replicate. Dragons told their young of the human who taught them gentleness. Humans taught their children the songs that made the world whole again. And when they cooked together, sharing food, laughter, and stories, they felt a pulse through the ground, as if the planet itself approved. Above them, the auroras danced eternally, threads of violet and gold weaving stories across the heavens. Some swore they could see a great dragon's silhouette gliding through the light, wings wide, gaze serene. Others heard a faint voice in the wind, encouraging them to keep feeding the fire that made them kind. And so, long after names faded into myth, the legacy of one cafeteria worker and a fallen prince endured, not as legend carved in stone, but as warmth shared wherever beings gathered to eat, to dream, and to remember.